In medieval Europe, during the Middle Ages, knights were among the most powerful and respected warriors in society. They were not just soldiers, but an important part of the feudal system that shaped Europe for centuries. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe became divided into many small kingdoms and territories where central authority was weak and local lords gained power. To maintain control and protection, kings began granting land, known as a fief, to loyal followers in exchange for military service. These followers were called vassals, and within this feudal structure, the role of the knight gradually developed. A knight was essentially a heavily armed mounted warrior who fought on horseback. Their armor, weapons, and warhorses were extremely expensive, which meant that only members of the noble class could usually afford to become knights. Because of this, knighthood became closely associated with nobility and social status. Training of a knight started at a very young age. Around the age of 7, a noble boy would be sent to serve in another noble household as a page, where he learned basic education, religion, manners, and the early skills of combat. By the age of 14, he would become a squire, serving directly under a knight. As a squire, he cared for his master's armor and horse, accompanied him into battles, and continued learning advanced fighting skills such as swordsmanship, riding, and strategy. After years of training and proving his courage and loyalty, the young warrior could finally be knighted. The knighting ceremony was both a military and religious ritual. Often the candidate would spend the night praying. The next day a king or lord would tap him on the shoulder with a sword and declare him a knight. From that moment, he was expected to follow the code of chivalry, which emphasized bravery, loyalty, honor, and the protection of the weak. Although these ideals sounded noble, the reality of medieval warfare was often harsh and brutal. On the battlefield, knights were considered the elite fighting force because of their powerful cavalry charges. Armed with long lances and riding, heavily trained warhorses, they could smash through enemy infantry lines with speed and force. Early knights wore chainmail armor, made of thousands of small interlocking metal rings that offered flexibility and protection. However, by the 14th century, plate armor became more common, covering the body with strong steel plates that provided greater defense. Despite its heavy appearance, a well-trained knight could move surprisingly well in full armor. Knights also relied on specially bred warhorses called destriers, which were strong enough to carry armored riders into battle. Throughout the Middle Ages, knights played important roles in many famous wars, including the Crusades, where European knights traveled to the Middle East to fight for control of the Holy Land. Military religious orders such as the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller became famous for combining the life of monks with that of warriors. However, the dominance of knights on the battlefield slowly began to decline. During the 100 Years' War between England and France, battles like Crécy in 1346 and Agincourt in 1415 showed that knights were no longer invincible. English longbowmen were able to defeat large numbers of heavily armored French knights by attacking them from a distance, while they struggled to advance across muddy ground. At the same time, the introduction of gunpowder weapons, such as cannons and early firearms, further reduced the effectiveness of traditional knightly armor. As warfare evolved, kings began relying less on feudal knights and more on professional soldiers and organized standing armies. This shift marked the gradual end of the knight's military dominance. By the 16th century, knights were no longer the central force in European warfare. Although knighthood itself survived as an honorary title and symbol of prestige, despite their decline, knights remained powerful cultural icons. Stories and legends about heroic knights became popular throughout Europe, especially tales such as King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, which celebrated the ideals of bravery, loyalty, and honor. Even today, the image of the armored knight riding into battle remains one of the most recognizable symbols of the medieval world, although their era eventually ended due to changing technology and political systems. The legacy of the medieval knight continues to live on in history, literature, and popular culture.